They were buried beneath the sand, beneath centuries of silence, beneath layers of heat, humidity, and salt that erode everything in their path. For years, scientists believed the Arabian Peninsula was beyond the reach of ancient DNA research. Too harsh, too decayed, too late. Bahrain, the ancient island once hailed as the seat of Dilmun and a jewel of trade routes, was considered genetically silent. But science, like memory, is persistent. And now that silence has been broken. This is not just a story of bones unearthed. This is the resurrection of history, not through monuments or pottery, but through the microscopic code of life itself. In a world where Europe and the Levant had already yielded rich libraries of ancient genomes, Arabia remained a ghost. The climatic conditions, searing temperatures, corrosive humidity, high salt levels, were thought to destroy every genetic trace left in human remains. For decades, Bahrain's legendary burial mounds, numbering in the tens of thousands, stood as beautiful but mute memorials. Then a breakthrough. A team of geneticists and archaeologists, led by Dr. Ray Martiniano and backed by the Bahrain Authority for Culture and Antiquities, dared to attempt what others had deemed impossible. They selected petrous bones, the densest bones in the human body, found at the base of the skull, from Tylos-period graves dating between 300 BCE and 600 CE. The odds were against them, but from within those calcified vaults came something no one expected: intact ancient DNA. Only 4 individuals, sequenced from a pool of 25 sampled remains. Just 4, but enough to fracture the silence of centuries. For the first time, the genomes of ancient Eastern Arabians had a voice, and they had much to say. This wasn't just technical success. This was a scientific milestone. For years, scholars had speculated on the demographic history of Bahrain using modern DNA, looking backward through echoes. But this was different. This was direct testimony from the past. No more inferences. No more approximations. These were the actual genetic signatures of people who walked the land during Bahrain's golden age. Their bones, their cells, still remembered who they were. And as we'll soon see in the coming chapters of this journey, they carried more than just ancestry. They carried adaptation, resistance, migration, and survival. Their DNA wasn't just a record of origin. It was a chronicle of struggle and evolution. Somewhere in the bloodstream of an ancient Bahraini child, long before kingdoms rose or fell, nature launched a silent war. The enemy was invisible, a parasite carried by a mosquito, but the battle was real. It ravaged the weak, punished the vulnerable, and shadowed human life with fever, fatigue, and death. Yet, somewhere along the line, one human body, perhaps in agony, perhaps in silence, changed the course of this ancient conflict forever. It passed on a mutation, a microscopic armor forged not in a lab, but in the harsh fields of survival. This is the story of that mutation, and it begins in Bahrain. 3 out of 4 ancient individuals from Tylos-period Bahrain, their remains lying untouched for nearly 2,000 years, carried a specific genetic marker, the G6PD Mediterranean variant. To most, it's a sequence of letters. To scientists, it's a flag, a rare and powerful genetic adaptation that grants resistance to malaria. Its presence in ancient bones is not just a discovery. It's a revelation. For the first time, direct genetic evidence proves that ancient Arabian populations didn't just suffer malaria. They evolved against it. But this wasn't random luck. The rise of this mutation tells a deeper story. Around 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, a fundamental shift occurred across the region: agriculture. Humans stopped roaming and began cultivating. Fields replaced wildlands. Irrigation systems channeled stagnant water. Villages became crowded. And unknowingly, we built paradise for mosquitoes. Malaria didn't arrive by chance. We invited it. But in response, evolution sharpened its blade. The G6PD mutation isn't a superpower. It comes at a cost. People with it are more prone to certain blood conditions if exposed to specific triggers. But the price was worth the trade. A better chance of surviving childhood, of seeing another season, of bearing children. Over generations, this mutation spread, locked in a dance of death and defense with the disease that haunted ancient Bahrain. And today, that same ancient mutation still lives on, not just in the past, but in modern populations across the Arabian Peninsula, highest in the Emirates, but present throughout. It links today's Bahrainis directly to their Tylos-era ancestors, not through language or artifact, but through the very blood running through their veins. Evolution doesn't speak in poetry, but sometimes it leaves behind echoes, a cellular signature that says, "We endured." This isn't just science. It's legacy. Proof that Bahrain's ancient people were not passive victims of their environment. They were resilient, adaptive, shaped by forces both visible and invisible. Their DNA doesn't just carry ancestry. It carries the memory of their struggle, of their response to climate, agriculture, and disease. In the bones of the ancient dead, we find the secrets of survival. And in those secrets, we find ourselves. They walked the sun-bleached soil of an island that watched empires rise and fall, merchants, farmers, warriors, priests. But who were they truly? Beneath the layers of myth and memory, what did their blood say about where they came from? Not in stories, not in speculation, but in the unalterable record etched into their very DNA. For centuries, Bahrain was a bridge, a corridor where ideas, trade, and people collided. But the true scope of that human traffic has remained buried until now. The ancient genomes extracted from Tylos-period burials tell a story far richer than we imagined. These weren't isolated desert dwellers. Their genes trace lines that stretch across continents, from the highlands of Anatolia to the fertile valleys of the Levant, and into the rugged heart of ancient Iran and the Caucasus. They carried it all. A woven tapestry of ancestry that speaks of contact, movement, and complex interconnection. And yet, they weren't uniform. Each genome from the ancient remains revealed a different blend. One leaned toward the Levant, another pulled toward Iranian Caucasian strands, while yet another carried a profile so mixed it defied any single origin. It wasn't just that Bahrain was a melting pot. It was a genetic frontier. Even more striking was what they were not. Despite being buried just steps away from where modern Bahrainis now live, these ancient individuals were genetically more similar to people from modern-day Iraq and the Levant than to the populations currently inhabiting the Arabian Peninsula. It's a revelation that turns conventional narratives on their heads. The land remained, but its people shifted. The bloodlines that once flowed through this island didn't stay still. They morphed, mixed, moved. Why does this matter? Because history isn't just about kings and battles. It's about people. And their stories, the real ones, are buried deeper than any artifact. These ancient Bahrainis were living evidence of a pre-Islamic world, far more cosmopolitan than many assume. They weren't genetically Arab in the modern sense. They were something older, something more entangled with the great human migrations that reshaped Western Asia during the Bronze and Iron Ages. What we see in their DNA aligns with what archaeologists find in pottery styles, burial customs, and trade goods. That Bahrain was not merely influenced by foreign cultures. It was part of them, genetically integrated into the networks that defined the ancient world. These weren't outsiders passing through. They were participants in the making of civilization. There's a kind of quiet dignity in knowing that the people who lived and died here carried within them not just one lineage, but many. That their very existence was a testimony to openness, to hybridity, to survival through diversity. It makes you wonder, when we look at Bahrain today, what traces of this hidden complexity still remain? How much of this ancient fusion still echoes in the faces we pass on the street? Because the past doesn't vanish. It imprints itself, not in monuments or ruins, but in us. When you trace the male line, the uninterrupted path from father to son, generation after generation, you're following a thread as old as time. A single strand of the Y chromosome, passed down with stunning fidelity, becomes a time capsule of identity. And in Bahrain, that thread doesn't weave a simple story. It reveals a crossroads where continents met, collided, and reshaped one another. The study of over 500 Bahraini men, spread across all regions of the kingdom, opened a door into the deepest chapters of paternal ancestry. What emerged was not a straight line, but a web. Dominant among these lineages were haplogroups J1 and J2, both rooted in the Arabian Peninsula but divergent in their journeys. J1, often associated with Bedouin and Semitic-speaking populations, flourished in Bahrain's southern and eastern regions, where the desert winds still whisper the names of ancient tribes. In contrast, J2 peaked in the north and capital, zones historically tied to the Bahrain and Ajam communities, groups with long-standing ties to Persia and Mesopotamia. This wasn't coincidence. This was demographic memory, geography aligning with genetics. The capital didn't just govern trade. It absorbed it. The north didn't just grow palm trees. It harvested centuries of migration. And then came the surprises. Haplogroups like E1b1a and B2, common in sub-Saharan Africa, were also found in the Bahraini gene pool. These aren't recent arrivals. They echo centuries of cultural exchange and forced migration, some through trade, others through darker chapters of human history. Yet their presence is a testament to resilience, a reminder that African blood helped shape the soul of this island. Further east, markers like R2, H, and Del point unmistakably towards South Asia. Their origin stories lie in the Indus valleys, the Deccan plateaus, brought by merchants, sailors, or perhaps laborers who came to Bahrain's ports seeking fortune or refuge. Their legacy now runs through the veins of Bahrain's sons. Even the presence of R1b, a haplogroup more common in Europe, hints at the era of Portuguese control over Bahrain's coastlines, an empire that came with soldiers, settlers, and silent genetic signatures that would outlast their flags. But these aren't just statistical blips in a genetic table. They are lives. They are stories. Every haplogroup is a whispered name in an ancient tongue, a fingerprint on the handle of a sword, a memory wrapped in flesh and salt and sand. Bahrain's male lineage isn't a tree with a single trunk. It's a forest fed by rivers that flowed in from Africa, Asia, Persia, and Arabia itself. It reflects not purity, but complexity. Not isolation, but connection. This diversity, visible even within a population as small as the Bahraini sample, points to something profound. Even within one island, different regions carry distinct genetic legacies. The northern and capital governorates, rich in J2, may tell a different ancestral tale than Maharak or the south, where J1 reigns. These are not just local variations. They are living records of who came, who stayed, and who became Bahraini. When you walk the streets of Manama, or sit beside a fisherman in Maharak, or share tea with an elder in Rifa, remember, the Y DNA in their cells has crossed deserts, oceans, and centuries to arrive here. It's not just heritage. It's history, written in the bloodlines of men. In the quiet passing of mitochondrial DNA, from mother to child, across generations, lies a story that often escapes the pages of history books. Where wars and dynasties are built around men, the maternal line moves beneath the surface, resilient, persistent, and quietly shaping the soul of a people. In Bahrain, when researchers examined this invisible inheritance, they discovered something extraordinary. The voices of mothers long forgotten, carried forward in the blood of their daughters and sons. Unlike the Y chromosome, which only travels down the male line, mitochondrial DNA is passed to every child by their mother, unchanged, undiluted, a thread that reaches back thousands of years. And when 213 Bahraini individuals were tested, something remarkable was found. The diversity was striking. Out of 178 detected mitotypes, more than 83% were completely unique, a level of variation that defied expectations for a population of this size. But it wasn't just the numbers. It was what they meant. When compared with neighboring populations in Lebanon and Jordan, Bahraini maternal DNA stood apart, statistically distinct, separated not just by geography, but by genetic history. This wasn't the echo of a single migration or isolated event. It was the imprint of countless generations of women whose stories remain undocumented, but whose biology survives. What's even more intriguing is that while paternal lineages often followed predictable paths, tied to tribal movement, conquest, or political control, the maternal line told a more fluid, more intimate tale. Women may have arrived through marriage, trade, or as members of seafaring communities that dotted the Gulf's ancient shores. Their DNA carried no banners, spoke no royal decrees, but it persisted. And in that persistence, we see the mosaic of Bahrain's maternal past. Haplogroups that point toward South Asia, the Horn of Africa, the Levant, and even rare Western Eurasian strains. These weren't fragments from a single origin. They were threads gathered from many directions, spun into a uniquely Bahraini fabric. It challenges the notion of uniformity. It erases the idea of a singular identity. For a region so defined by patriarchal structures, this maternal narrative is quietly revolutionary. It tells us that even in eras where women's names were lost to time, their genetic signatures endured, not on monuments, but within the cells of every modern Bahraini. And because mitochondrial DNA mutates so slowly, those same sequences can stretch deep into prehistory. Some of the haplogroups identified in modern Bahrainis may well have been present since the Dilmun period, perhaps even earlier. That means a child born today could still be carrying the exact same maternal lineage as someone buried under one of Bahrain's ancient burial mounds, a genetic bridge across millennia. So next time you speak of ancestry, remember, it's not always loud. It doesn't always wear a crown or ride into battle. Sometimes it whispers through generations, crossing oceans and empires, encoded in the gentle bond between a mother and her child. That's not just biology. That's legacy. If paternal DNA tells us where the men went, and mitochondrial DNA whispers the path of the mothers, then autosomal DNA is the chorus of everything in between. It is the full picture, the inherited mosaic from both parents, recombined with every generation, holding within it the echoes of thousands of ancestors. In Bahrain, this genetic symphony speaks not just of who the people are, but how history carved itself into their very cells. When scientists analyzed 21 autosomal street loci from over 500 Bahraini males, they weren't just collecting numbers, they were peeling back layers of hidden ancestry. Unlike lineage-specific markers, autosomal DNA captures the complex interweaving of entire populations over time. And what they found was a genetic structure as intricate as the island's past, diverse, regionally patterned, and deeply connected to its neighbors. The first revelation was the depth of variation. Across the tested loci, some carried as many as 48 different alleles, an astonishing level of diversity for a small Gulf nation. But what does that mean? It means Bahrainis carry within them a record of widespread admixture. Generations of mixing, not just locally, but with people from across Arabia, Persia, East Africa, and South Asia, left fingerprints on their genome. These weren't shallow connections. Genetic distances calculated through FST analysis revealed Bahrainis to be most closely related to Saudis and Emiratis, a reflection of shared geography, cultural affinity, and historical interaction. But the signal didn't stop there. Kuwaitis, Iranians, and even some South Asian populations showed proximity, reminding us of Bahrain's long-standing role as a maritime hub. Each region of Bahrain also told its own story. Minor but meaningful variations in allele frequencies suggest that the northern, capital, southern, and Mahara governorates have distinct genetic identities. Even within the same island, the population is not a monolith, but a living archive of settlements, migrations, and familial histories layered over time. Beyond ancestry, this data holds crucial value for the present. Autosomal profiles are already being used for forensic analysis, aiding in identification, solving criminal cases, and even assessing population risk for certain diseases. One sample may hold the key to both a historical puzzle and a medical breakthrough. The data also revealed rare and unexpected variants, triallelic patterns, off-ladder alleles, and combinations not previously recorded in global datasets. These genetic anomalies aren't errors. They're signatures of unique inheritance, preserved in families, communities, or even isolated lineages that trace back to unknown ancestors. This is not just about who Bahrainis are related to. It's about how centuries of maritime trade, tribal movement, empire, enslavement, colonization, and kinship all flowed into the same stream, and how that stream continues to ripple through every newborn child on the island. Autosomal DNA, in this sense, is not just a record. It's a mirror, one that reflects not only where a person came from, but how many other lives, from faraway lands and forgotten cities, converged to create the face we see today. In Bahrain's genetic landscape, nothing is singular. Everything is shared. Centuries after ancient Bahrainis carved their existence into the limestone mounds of the island, their descendants now step into clinics and labs, not with shovels or scrolls, but with saliva samples and sequencers. The story of Bahraini DNA is no longer just about the past. It's becoming a blueprint for the future. In 2019, a bold national vision took form, the Bahrain Genome Program, a mission that set out not merely to catalog ancestry, but to harness the country's genetic diversity for a revolution in healthcare. No myths, no assumptions, just data, pure biological truth, and the ambition to collect 50,000 complete human genomes from across the kingdom and decode the genetic architecture of an entire population. This wasn't about joining a global trend. It was about charting a path that no Arab state had traveled so comprehensively before. The project united Bahrain's Ministry of Health, Brigham and Women's Hospital, and the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard, 3 pillars, each bringing cutting-edge expertise to a local mission with global consequences. But what makes Bahrain's Genome Project unique isn't just its scope, it's the intent. Unlike generic databases that lump Arab populations into broad categories, Bahrain's approach is intimate, specific, and layered. Each participant doesn't just contribute to a national archive. They receive personalized reports about their own health, ancestry, and genetic risks. It's not a one-way street. It's a conversation between science and society. Within the first wave of results, researchers began uncovering population-specific variants, mutations and markers rarely seen outside of Bahrain. Some were linked to hereditary diseases, others to metabolic traits or drug response. This kind of information has the power to reshape medicine, to predict who might develop a condition years before symptoms appear, or to design treatments tailored to individual DNA. And the implications go beyond diagnostics. This data is also laying the groundwork for a new generation of genetic counselors, researchers, and bioinformaticians trained within Bahrain. The country is not just importing knowledge, it's cultivating it, investing in education, infrastructure, and genomic medicine clinics that will soon stand at the intersection of biology and public health. It's easy to talk about genetics in abstract terms, genes, alleles, sequences. But here, it becomes tangible. A child born with a rare disorder may now receive faster, more accurate treatment because of patterns uncovered through this project. A couple planning a family can be screened for inherited risks that might otherwise remain hidden. Entire communities may benefit from preventive health policies built on solid genomic foundations. And perhaps most profound of all, this effort bridges time. The very same genome that adapted to malaria thousands of years ago is now being studied to understand disease susceptibility in modern Bahrainis. The past isn't just a curiosity, it's a medical asset. The Bahrain Genome Program is more than science. It's a statement that a small island, shaped by migration and complexity, can lead the region into an era where medicine is not just reactive, but predictive, where ancestry is not just a story, it's a strategy. The bones of the ancestors once whispered of survival. Today, those whispers have become code, guiding the hands of doctors, shaping the future of care, and redefining what it means to understand where we come from. In a land where burial mounds rise like ancient waves across the desert, not every secret has yet been spoken. Bahrain has opened a genetic doorway, but behind it lies a corridor still stretching deep into time, filled with questions waiting to be answered. The genomes of just 4 ancient individuals cracked open the silence of centuries, yet they are only fragments of a far older puzzle. The past is not done revealing itself. With the success of extracting DNA from the unforgiving soil of Eastern Arabia, something once thought impossible has now become inevitable. Scientists are no longer asking if more ancient genomes can be recovered. They're asking when and how many. The fragile strands of DNA that survived against all odds in Tylos-period bones now promise access to eras even further back. The Bronze Age, the Dilmun civilization, and perhaps even the Neolithic roots of settlement on the island. This isn't speculation, it's strategy. Behind the scenes, a new wave of archaeological sampling is underway, targeting deeper layers of Bahrain's history. Burial mounds once dismissed as too degraded are being revisited with advanced techniques. Technologies like next-generation sequencing, improved contamination filtering, and ultra-sensitive extraction protocols are changing the rules of engagement. Where once there was silence, science now hears echoes. and those echoes grow louder. Preliminary findings suggest that population diversity in Bahrain was already present before the rise of Islam, a genetic heterogeneity that may stretch back thousands of years. But what drove it? Were there specific migration pulses during the Bronze Age? Did climate shifts, like the 4.2 kilo-year aridification event, reshape settlement patterns and gene flow? How did Persian, Sumerian, and even South Asian interactions leave their mark on the people who lived and died here? Every new genome holds the potential to answer these questions, not through guesses or inscriptions, but through measurable, testable biological evidence. And the stakes are not merely academic. These discoveries are beginning to redefine what it means to be Bahraini. The more we uncover about the genetic fabric of ancient Bahrain, the more we see that identity was never fixed. It was built over generations, across cultures, through adaptation and arrival. The DNA tells us that belonging didn't come from blood purity. It came from mixture. What comes next could change regional history. The Arabian Peninsula has long been underrepresented in global genetic studies, treated as a blank spot between empires. But Bahrain, with its archaeological richness and now proven DNA viability, is poised to become the epicenter of a new scientific awakening. An Arabian genomics renaissance, one rooted not just in innovation, but in deep-time discovery. And perhaps the most poetic twist? That the same bones once buried in silence, surrounded by sand, salt, and time, are now speaking louder than ever. Not with words, but with sequences. Not with myths, but with molecules. So as the next layer of excavation begins, and as new ancient samples are pulled from the earth, we're not just digging for artifacts. We're listening for the voices of ancestors we've never met. Each genome a memory, each mutation a breadcrumb, each sequence a piece of a much greater story. The past is not behind us. It's beneath us, waiting to be found.